Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to cover the playbook that I've put together on how to interpret EKGs. So if you're new to the channel, welcome. This is going to be a step-by-step basics on interpreting EKGs. So I put together a little playbook. You follow the playbook, you'll be able to interpret EKGs like a professional. All right, the first thing we want to do is we want to be familiar with all of these steps. Now the first step is always you want to check for regularity. Now, a lot of people get confused on what is regularity. Well, does that mean normal sinus rhythm? Is that a normal rhythm? Is that a normal EKG? And that's not quite what we're talking about when we're speaking of regularity. What we're trying to assess in step one is we're trying to assess the consistency for each heartbeat. And the way we're going to do that is we're going to measure and assess and interpret based on the spacing between similar looking QRS complexes. So if you look down here, right across, what we're really trying to do is measure the distance and the spacing between QRS to QRS. And if that is consistent all the way across your EKG, we know that that stimulus is arising from one single cell. And that's what's going to lead to something like a sinus rhythm, because the sinus node is the dominant pacemaker and it's always firing for nice healthy individuals. It will lead to a consistent or a regularly spaced QRS to QRS. So what we're looking for again, regularity, QRS spacing, consistent. We want to make sure it is predictable. And a really easy way for you to do that is if you have an EKG strip on paper, take another piece of paper, fold it in half, line up one edge of the paper, cover the next QRS, and make a marking on that. And now you've just created a nice ruler for yourself. Now you can just slide right over, line up that edge there, and if you find that that next QRS lands on that marking that you made, you're regular. You want to make sure you check all the way across. The second step, step number 2, is you want to identify your waves. So we're going to check for all of your waves. The one we're really, the real important one that we want to look for is your P waves, because your P waves will give us more information as far as where is this signal originating from. If we have a P wave and that P wave looks the same in every single beat that we come across, then it's safe to say that, hey, that's coming from the sinus node, and that's a good thing. Okay, so you want to check your P waves. Do they all look the same? That's the important part, because if they all look the same, we're in good shape. If they look different, then they're going to be generated by different areas of the atrium, and we need to be a little bit more cautious in our interpretation. And we'll take that into consideration as well. So then you also want to take a look at your QRS complexes, make sure that those all look the same, and make sure that all QRS complexes have a T wave that follow them. If you have all 3 of those complexes, you're good to go. Let's move on to the next step. What you want to do is you want to check for your intervals. Now this is an important part in interpreting EKGs. I like to put this here at step number 3 because that way you get familiar and you don't overlook things like atrioventricular blocks or bundle branch blocks, okay? So checking for your intervals is going to give you information and insight on AV blocks and bundle branch blocks. So you want to look at your PR intervals. PR interval is going to be the beginning of your atrium to right before the beginning of your QRS complex, okay? So our P wave, right? The beginning of our P wave to the beginning of the QRS complex, right? The P wave signifies atrial depolarization or atrial contraction. So that's the blood moving from the atrium down towards the ventricles. And that little pause there at the at baseline there following that P wave, that's the time that's allotted for the blood to move from the atrium down through the valves into the ventricles. Okay? And then your QRS complex, right? That's our QRS interval. The beginning of the QRS complex to the end of the QRS complex. That's going to be your ventricular systole or your ventricular contraction. Okay, that's going to be the blood moving out of the heart. Okay, so you all want to make sure you check for your intervals. Step number 4, I like to tell people, make sure that you're investigating for abnormal beats. Now, that's a pretty generic term, and abnormal beats are going to come in many shapes and forms. Okay, but what we're really looking for are premature beats, escape beats, okay, or what I like to call drop beats. And these are drop beats from AV blocks. That's why we're going to analyze those right below when we're checking our intervals. The next thing you're going to do is you're going to check and calculate your rate, especially if it's on paper. Now there's different methods in calculating rate. For the students that I teach 3 different methods. I teach the 1500 method, I teach the 300 or the triplicate method, okay, and then I teach the 6-second time period method, okay. But what we're trying to identify is what is the person's heart rate at this point in time based on the spacing across your EKG. And it's important to select the correct method to calculate the rate based on step number 1, because I'm going to calculate a rate based on regularity. If it's regular, I'll use the most accurate method, which is the 1500 method, compared to a rhythm that would be irregular, something like atrial fibrillation, which is irregularly spaced between QRS to QRS. So that method of 1500 will not work. So we'll use the 6-second method. Finally, you're going to take all the information you've gathered from step 1 to step 5, and you're going to make a rhythm interpretation. Okay? So it's really important to make sure you go through these step by step. That way you don't miss things, okay? And you're gonna get yourself a really nice, accurate interpretation of your EKG. All right, guys, until next time, thanks a lot. Bye-bye.